Well, greetings, everybody. We're having some technical difficulties. And hang in there, Alan. Here we go. I'm going to promote you to presenter. And you should be on now. You can turn on your webcam and check your microphone. I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. We're getting a bit of a late start. Having some minor issues here. Alan will get on here in a minute. He'll unmute his mic, which is the microphone thingy on the left side or on the top. You just click on it, unmute your mic, and then you can turn on your webcam. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We hear you now, yes.
You need me to adjust. You need to adjust my sound on this end.
No, this program does it automatically.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to turn on your webcam so we can see you, or you can be incognito. Either way.
Okay.
So, anyways, our guest speaker tonight is going to be Alan Turner, and he will introduce himself and his topic. I'm going to ask a quick prayer on the meeting, and there we go. And then we will go from there. Great Creator God and Father in heaven, we come before you now, asking your blessing upon this meeting, asking your blessing upon the technology, that everything goes smoothly and we don't have any problems, that everybody hears and everybody sees, that you bless the listening, bless the speaking, and be a part of this meeting and this Bible study. So, Father, we just ask these things now in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Alan, it's all yours. You can introduce your topic and go for it.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight to listen to this talk. I'm experimenting with this new headset for the first time, so I will have to get used to that. For those of you who already saw the title of tonight's talk, A Biblical View of Wealth, Free Markets, and Prosperity was my original title. And I tried to give this talk in a local group a couple months back, and it was a little bit, how could I say, not received well at first. So the second time I came to give part two, I changed the title altogether. The reason I think it wasn't well received in the beginning is because the idea of generating wealth, free markets, and prosperity are not things that people who are deep into their retirement years are very concerned about. They're more concerned about the issues that they deal with in their senior years. So I changed the title. What does the Bible say about money? And I think that that's a better title, and I think it actually represents the material a lot more accurately. So, if you will, turn over to 3 John 2. We're going to start by reading 3 separate scriptures. We're going to read 3 John 2, Proverbs 3:9, and Ecclesiastes 10, just to get us warmed up and thinking about the concept of what does the Bible say about money. Now, I know that this topic cannot be covered in one sitting. It would be impossible, because as I dug a little bit into this topic, I found out the Bible says a lot more about money than you would at first think? I mean, the amount of scripture that delves into these key study words that I use: money, wealth, riches, wages, gold, silver, poverty, mammon, prosperity, prosper, abundance, treasure, theft, and a few other words. By the time you explore these key study words, you have piles and piles of material. It cannot be covered in one sitting. But let's begin by reading 3 John 2, just to whet our appetite. Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in wealth and health, even as thy soul prospers. Now, this word prosper, if you look it up in a Bible dictionary, concordance, or lexicon, you'll see that it has the connotation of business prosperity. Second scripture that whets our appetite is Proverbs 3:9. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 9 says, honor the Lord with your substance and also with the first fruits of all your increase. I know that many of us have heard untold amount of messages in years past concerning whether or not you are really giving your all and giving your best financially. And the guilt trip thing, this was misused perhaps by some, but the scripture is nevertheless true. And we ought to do those things spoken of here. The third one to whet our appetite is Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 19. If I'm going a little too fast on this, just somebody speak up. Back off. There's just so much material. It's 42 pages that I have so far on this study, and we'll probably have to come back to it another time. In Ecclesiastes 10:19, we read, a feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers all things. Does it really? Well, it does answer a lot of things, doesn't it? If the dishwasher breaks, you can take care of that with money. If there's a leaky roof, you can do that. But there are some things it doesn't really answer. And we'll be going into some of those things later in the study. So let me ask you some introspective questions. How often do you think about money or financial security? You think much about your monthly budget? You think about retirement savings, or perhaps a cushion for emergencies, which is very important. Let me ask you this. Can we find any teaching, even one teaching in the Bible, that teaches prosperity? That teaches poverty is better than prosperity for the Christian? No, we can't. And I would challenge anyone to find even one verse throughout the entirety of the Bible. It says it's better to be impoverished than to have prosperity. Fact is, many were given great riches. And if having great riches is an evil thing, then certainly Job, at the end of his life, was given a very evil thing. We'll go on to that a little bit later. So, can we find any teachings that say poverty is better? No, we cannot. But some people tend to pride themselves on poverty, as if it is somehow more righteous to be needy than it is to have abundance. Well, what do you think? Do some people pride themselves on that? Does your Father in heaven want you to live in neediness? Okay, let's talk about Christian entrepreneurs for a moment. One of the reasons I even started this study is because my son-in-law and daughter have gone into business for themselves. So a lot of things passed through my mind. I began to think about what is the role of the Christian entrepreneur in this world? And has the church kind of maybe not really reinforced in the past, or has the church maybe failed to encourage the young people in the church as they grow up to nurture them into the idea of entrepreneurship? And if they haven't, did they think that it was a bad idea? And this is why we don't encourage it. Is the world too dangerous? Is being in business a bad thing for the Christian? So let me just read here from some of my thoughts. Entrepreneurship provides the substance that drives new markets, stimulates innovation and invention. You've heard of Uber. Some of you have probably watched Shark Tank. And some of you have probably been to craft shows, arts and craft shows that come through your communities. Entrepreneurs, they weigh the risk and reward potential of new ideas and prospects. And then they commit themselves into a demanding and unpredictable process. They're attempting to produce a fruitful result that can become a great benefit to society. Many Christians do very well at being entrepreneurs. Equipped with passion, integrity, and other virtues, they view the marketplace as an opportunity for a win-win between buyers and sellers. They believe in honest and fair exchange in every transaction. They know about just balances. If you turn over to Leviticus 19, verse 35, we're going to look at that for a second. In Leviticus 19:35, we see something about just balances. And part of the instruction to Israel here, we see that cheating is a great disservice to the community. It is a sin. Of course, it falls right in with the commandment, thou shalt not steal. But here's how he expresses it in Leviticus 19:35. You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, and I'm in the King James here, in meat yard, in weight, or in measure, just balances, just weights, a just ephah, just hin shall you have. I'm the Lord your God which brought you out of the land of Egypt. So it's kind of a funny thing. It goes through, measurements of weights and volumes. And, we've all seen the image of the tipping scales that, that represent fairness, that you would not be cheated. Even in front of the courthouse, right? The lady justice is blind. She's got a blindfold on, and she's holding the scales. And that means that everybody gets an equal and fair and just shake in the justice system. But what happens when you shake something like a box of cereal, for example? We buy these products off the shelf and they seem to be only half full. A bag of potato chips or a box of cereal or other products where it's hidden inside the package. And that really isn't a just balance or a good representation of what's inside. And so our marketing techniques have been such, over time, the box of Wheaties is less and less full over the years. And I think even the Big Mac is smaller, and the Quarter Pounder. A lot of things are smaller and smaller over time. But this is such an important point here. If people who are in business are in the habit or have the potential and reputation for cheating, what happens? Well, then we have to have all these checks and balances put in place. We have to not trust anybody, right? We have to expect that people are going to try to take advantage of us. And it soils the entire business community. Everyone is trying to get an advantage or get some kind of upper hand in the exchange of goods and services. So we have all this distrust. And we expect it now, right? We expect people to not give us a fair measure. So we're always looking and checking. And, it really messed up a lot of things when people decided a long time ago they were not going to be honest. This has to do with money, doesn't it? Because every time you get cheated, whether you bought a car and the salesman said it was a good car and it wasn't, or whether you bought a box of cereal and it was only half full, whatever it is that you're being cheated, what is it that you're really being cheated out of? Your money. Because your time is your money, right? And the amount of time you put in at work to generate that income has now been swept away by a dishonest exchange. So it's all about the money, isn't it? Well, the Christian approach to business is very different than the secular. Christians view the world as a place where they're to have a positive and virtuous influence. They understand that the purpose and function of wealth and work is to provide a means for people to produce and to flourish. They're not motivated to amass wealth simply for the purpose of enriching ourselves, but instead they understand the purpose of wealth is to create prosperity so that we can provide blessings, give generously, and so that others will learn to grow and to do the same. Christians ultimately want to leave a legacy of giving and sharing the fruits of our labor so that by example, the culture itself will be able to understand the ways of God in action. I'm reading a book recently. It's called Invading Babylon. Maybe you can see it. Can you see that on the screen, Don? Can anybody see this?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. This is a very, very interesting book by Leonard Woolnough. If you go on YouTube, you can see some of his lectures. This book is about how the Christian person who is either in business or otherwise has a duty to take their faith into the community in many different arenas. Not only the church and family, but in education, in government and law. It says here you should also be taking your faith into media, that is television, radio, newspapers, internet. Your faith should be taken into arts and entertainment, sports, professional sports, commerce, science, banking, and technology, and all levels of industry, commercial and industrial. Now, the premise of the book is this, that if Christians will invade Babylon in such a way as they take their faith with them into every avenue, every respect of a functioning culture, such as the one we live in, this Babylon we live in, then the influence from those men and women of faith will be taken into the culture and be far more effective than for us to hide our faith in the corner because we're afraid of Babylon. And we have then almost little to no influence. In other words, the weightiness of the responsibility for our light to shine is it partly falls on your decision and we're to carry that light. If we hide ourselves and say, well, God will call whomever he will, and he's not requiring me to call people, but he'll do the calling, and all I have to do is just attend services each week and live my Christian life and be good to my next door neighbor and be a good employee. And no, it goes farther than that. If all Christians penetrated and advanced themselves into the culture in all those realms of media and government and banking and commerce and all the realms that run our nation, then the influence would be there. Oh, sure, it'd be very difficult for those individuals. But it was very difficult for Joseph in Egypt, and for Daniel in Babylon, and for Esther in Persia. It was a very, very difficult situation for them to live through, but they had tremendous influence as a result of not pulling back and cowering. So I know that those things were orchestrated for prophetic fulfillment. I know that. But there are things today that are going to be orchestrated also for prophetic fulfillment. And if our young people are being encouraged to take a part in reaching out into entrepreneurship, their influence and their trajectory into their business life will take them to places and cause influence to be spread around much, much more in these last days than it would otherwise. So I'm willing to listen to the counterpoint on this. So for those of you who maybe would like to express why you think it's a bad idea, I'm fully willing to listen to you. Also, I'd like to hear from you who believe we have not really encouraged that kind of career path for our young people, and that we ought to start doing that for the future of the church's sake. Okay. So how many levels of wealth are there? Consider wealth in a relative term. Where do you come in the strata of prosperity? Are you already wealthy by world standards? Americans, by the way, have become the object of envy, jealousy, and resentment by many nations because of our obvious abundance in every area of living. Even at poverty level in America, our standards of living are excellent in every way compared to most other nations. And of course, when compared to any third world nation. The person who is impoverished in America can get sick and go to a hospital and get state-of-the-art treatments, even though they are impoverished in America. A person in poverty here can be provided with food, shelter, a bridge card. A person can have their rent paid, their utilities paid, and all the rest. And I'm personally acquainted with that because I'm in the Detroit area. And I work in the city a lot, and I see a lot of people and talk to a lot of people. And I've come to the conclusion a long time ago that to be impoverished in America is to be wealthy in this world by comparison. But that doesn't mean that we should just be happy because we have a bridge card. And it doesn't mean that it's very satisfying to be in poverty in America. No, because the human mind needs to be a contributing member of society. And if we are not contributing, if we're not doing anything productive, if we are idle, then we become sick mentally and depressed, and many other associated problems come along with that. But what I'm trying to say here is that the strata that you are in, regardless of how you feel about yourself and your place in America, you're doing very well compared to most of the world. Now, everyone already knows that. I don't know why I'm saying it, but let's move on to everything we have belongs to him anyway. There are 3 scripture references that I'll mention, but we'll only turn to one. Let's turn to Psalm 50, verse 10. Psalm 50, verse 10. Now, the other companion verses for this is Deuteronomy 10:14 and Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Deuteronomy 10:14, Psalm 24, 1 and 2. We're going to read Psalm 50, verse 10. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains and the wild beasts of the field. They're mine. Oh, by the way, if I was hungry, I wouldn't tell you. A little bit of sarcasm, maybe? The world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Look, it all belongs to me. And by the way, you, your body, everything you're about, yeah, that belongs to me too. So I think it's good for people to understand that no matter where they are in the strata of wealth and prosperity, hey, none of it belongs to you anyway. But if you have anything, it is your responsibility to manage. And so you don't get to just throw your hands up and say, hey, look, it all belongs to God. He can do what he wants. It's like the guy who he was listening to a sermon about how we need to give a certain amount of our offering to God. So the man took all the money he had, and he says, I'll throw this up, and whatever lands on the table belongs to me. So he threw it all up, and it all came back down. I thought that was a funny story when I first heard that. But it's all his anyway, and so every individual, whether you're exceedingly wealthy or not, they have to come to this, and they have to realize, I'm being trusted, and I'm going to be accountable to be a responsible citizen with what I've been given. We're given the privilege to work towards producing a good result, that plenty will be provided for everyone. To the genuinely needy, we provide charity. To the strong, we give an opportunity to participate in the process of exchange of goods and services. And it's all being done on his dime, so to speak. All being done because we were created, we exist by his power, and it all belongs to him. So that's something to think about. Another thing to think about is that not everyone can or should handle the responsibility of wealth and prosperity. For some people, the temptation is too great. We all need balance in our lives. Both poverty and riches have negative temptations associated with them. So for many people, somewhere in the middle is the very best place to be. And you see that in Proverbs chapter 30. If you will all please turn over to Proverbs chapter 30, you will see this expression here, which, very poetic expression. And you know how Proverbs many times speaks in generalities. They're not absolutes, but they are general application principles that apply across the board. Now, we read in Proverbs 30, verse 7, this warning of the two extremes, saying the middle of the road is really the best. 2 things I have required of you, deny me not them before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me. That's probably better read in a more modern translation. It could say something in a modern translation, maybe like, feed me with my necessary food, what I need. Please meet my needs. And he says why he doesn't want either poverty or riches in verse 9, lest I be filled and deny you. Wow, isn't that a temptation? If you have way more than you need and you become very wealthy, and you don't keep your mindset correct, that, hey, this doesn't really belong to me anyway, but I have a responsibility. Wow, you could actually deny him because you become self-sufficient. That is a great temptation. Not everybody is able to handle that, especially in your early Christian walk. It's a great temptation for someone who has not built up very much faith and trust and confidence in our Creator to become self-sufficient. And it can happen to anyone. So he says, lest I be full and deny you. After all, if I'm a multimillionaire, I can buy what I want. Remember what we said earlier? Money answers everything. Ecclesiastes 6. But not really, does it? Because it doesn't really answer your spiritual health. You cannot gain spiritual health any more than the poor man, than the impoverished man who has a Bible, who spends his time in prayer, in study, meditation, and because he would have God's Holy Spirit dwelling in him, he has the potential for spiritual growth and maybe has gifts that no amount of money can buy. Okay, lest I be full and deny you, self-sufficiency. And I say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain, which is the other side of the coin, the temptation to then misrepresent the Christian faith by sinning through theft. And then you're a very poor example when someone says, wow, you're this Christian worker here, but you've been stealing. And now I don't know about that Christian faith. I'm not seeing a very good representation of what we're supposed to expect from a Bible-believing Christian. So in the middle, there's a balance. For most people, it is not to be exceedingly wealthy. You remember the song we used to sing, not many wise men now are called, not many noble brethren. And there's a reason for that. Because no flesh is going to glory in his presence. No one is going to say, wow, look what I did. Look how wonderful I am. Look how prosperous I am. Look what my hand has wrought. No, that's not what's going to happen. So we need contentment. Let's talk about contentment for a minute. The Bible tells us to be content. You can turn over to Philippians chapter 4. The Bible tells us to be content in whatever state we find ourselves in. This means we are personally accountable to roll with the punches in life and remain faithful through thick and thin. Because you're going to have your ups and your downs, and nobody is immune. Okay? Philippians 4. Verse 11, not that I speak in regard to need, but I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. Oh, it looks like I'm missing a page here. All right. I guess it's on the wall. Hang on. All right. I know how to be abased and I know how to abound everywhere and in all things. I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I know you've heard this verse 13 over and over concerning 1,000 different situations. But have you ever thought that the overall context of it has to do with contentment? Being content in whatever predicament you find yourself in. It doesn't mean, hey, I'm planning to build this big house, and you know what? Christ, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm going to have this project completed because of that verse. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean I can go on a job interview for a job that I'm not qualified for. And I can say, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. No, it doesn't mean that. So when you see this verse 13, being quoted over and over again, remember the context. Most people are using it out of context. It has to do with being able to roll with the punches and to deal with both the good times and the bad times, and to remain on an even keel, so to speak. To remain faithful, even if things are difficult, and not to be self-sufficient when things are good, on the other hand. And that is the direct context of the verse. All right. Now you can turn over one more on contentment. We'll look at 1 Timothy 6, verse 5. Again, being content with our state helps us remain godly. If you're discontented, however, leads us down a path towards possible envy, strife, covetousness, and other spiritual problems. If you remain in a state of discontentment for an extended period of time, then you need some help. And you need to go to those who love you and tell them what's going on and look for help. Because if you're discontented for an extended period, it's not going to turn out good. It doesn't end well. You don't want bitterness in your life. This is 1 Timothy 6, verse 5. Perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness. From those people, turn away or get away from those people. Don't associate with them if they suppose that gain is godliness. And I suppose you could look at things like the health and wealth gospel, and you could say, yes, people say sow a seed, and then whatever you sow will come back to you, kind of like an easy button, so to speak, that I can just do A and B, and then I will have an automatic, undeniable result. And so I will have a gain. I'll do it in a godly way, and I'll force it to happen because gain is godliness. You say, no, turn away from that. But godliness with contentment, if you have those two things together, that is a great gain. Now, it doesn't say poverty with contentment, and it doesn't say prosperity with contentment. And so could it be either one of those or in between? Because a person who has poverty or prosperity can have godliness and contentment. But you understand how these verses have been used and kind of spun a little bit and tweaked to indicate what's better if you have poverty and prosperity. Because after all you need is godliness with contentment. And that means being poor to some people. That's not what it says. It says, if you suppose that gain is godliness, then that's bad. But it also is saying here, godliness with contentment is great gain, whether you're rich or poor. So let me ask you a couple of questions. These are questions you should ask your children so that you can kind of probe their minds. And if you don't have children anymore, if they've grown up or what have you, then if you're interested in helping young people, whether they're in or out of the church, ask them these questions. What is true success? And write it down on paper. You answer this not for me or for the other person asking the question. You answer this for yourself. What is success? Then a little bit deeper of a question. Why would you want to be successful? If I met a Christian entrepreneur today, I would ask him that question. So you want to be successful. Well, what's your motive? What drives you? Why do you want it? Because if you have the wrong motivation, you don't understand the purpose and function of wealth for the Christian, and how prosperity is something that we are responsible to use properly to help other people, not to be wasteful, not to give it away in such a way that we would be enablers. And that is a pitfall too. But that you are responsible to provide light in the community, such as those who would hire people as employees, and how employees would see a Christian owner and how they do things, and how they are just and fair, and how they are generous. So I would ask them that question. What is success? Why do you want it? And what is the true purpose and function of prosperity for the Christian? And make them write it down. Solidify it. And you know as well as me, when you write something down, it becomes more solid in your mind, and your perception is more cemented on it. So let's now go over and look at, let's see here. Those of you who are keeping notes, I mentioned earlier my daughter, she went into business, real estate. Recently, she moved to Tampa, Florida, and her husband now have opened a real estate brokerage in Tampa. Before they left, when they were moving away, I asked them, what are you looking for? You're going to move away? You have aspirations to excel and to be successful? And I asked them this question, what is it that you're really looking for? You need to answer that for yourself. And for those people who are not interested in high aspirations, or for those who are either retired or in the middle of their career or early in their career, what are you looking for? How will you know when you find it? You recognize it? You think you think you have a specific goal, or you think that you want to arrive at a certain place in your career, in your family, in your spiritual life, as a citizen in your community? How are you going to know when you find that? And when you find it, then what? So those three questions: what are you looking for? How will you know when you find it? And after you find it, then what? Were the questions I put to those two young people before they got in the car and drove away and left mom and dad and just went down to Florida and abandoned us and started their own thing. And I'm really glad that they did it. I'm very, very proud of them, and very pleased with all the accomplishments that they have. So it's all about the money. Remember that famous line from that movie. It's all about the money. Let's read some warnings now. Warnings, let's start with James 4. I'm going to go through a few warnings here. Very, very intense confrontation between Christ in Luke 12 and Luke 16. And we'll start here with James 4. You ask, this is James 4, verse 3, having to do with asking for the right reason. So you're a Christian entrepreneur. You want to be a business person. You want to be successful. You think you know what you're looking for. Are you asking for the right reason? You ask and receive not. You keep on asking. I keep praying for success, but I'm not seeing it here. Because you ask for the wrong reason. You ask so that you might consume it upon your lust, so that you can enrich yourself and have all the dainty pleasures that come with being exceedingly wealthy. And your Father in heaven will not grant that request if you have bad motives. And he may not grant it either if your motives are pure. For other reasons. I think it's interesting that we can ask for many things, not just for success in business, but we can ask for many things, such as a promotion on the job or many other things that we might consume it upon our own lusts. And so we have to be very watchful of our motives. Let's go now over to another warning in Luke 12. This is verse 13. We're going to go down through 21. And you all know the situation here. Let's start in verse 13. This is Luke 12:13. And one of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. And said to him, Man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? I mean, the man wanted what he thought was justice. And he sees a just man, a teacher, a master, who he thinks will have the answer to his problem. What was going on here? Somebody wasn't sharing the inheritance. You think maybe the person who is asking the master has a problem with covetousness? You think maybe the brother who won't share has a problem with covetousness? How many times have people gone into courtrooms? Millions, I suspect, because they're trying to divide an inheritance and people are objecting to how it's being divided. It's a very common thing today, even. Let's read down here. And he said in verse 15, and he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consists not in the abundance of the things which he possesses. So it was both brothers who were concerned about the things that they possessed. I suspect this parable has the application to both brothers equally. It's not like one of the brothers was just and the other was unjust. I suspect they were both unjust. And he says, beware, because your life is not made out of the value of your life, that is. The value of a human being is not in how many toys he has or how the size of his bank account. And so he speaks a parable to them. The ground of a certain man brought forth richness plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do now? I don't have any room anymore to store all these goods. I know what I'm going to do. I'll pull down my barns and my storage buildings, and I'll build bigger ones. Then I'll be able to store all my stuff, my wealth, my goods, my riches. Then I'll have found what I was looking for. Remember, that was one of the questions. And I'll find what I'm looking for, and I'll say, soul, you have much goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat and drink, and be merry. Oh, there's a serious problem here, right? I have amassed all this wealth and riches, and it's all about me. I just expect to lather myself, keep myself supplied with the best of everything. Since I'm so wealthy and I've attained all these things through my own labor, look what great things I have attained. But God said to him, you fool, this night your soul shall be required of you. And when you're dead, then who will those things go to? So is he that lays up treasure only for himself and is not rich towards God. Now you could misread this section of scripture and say, see, it's not good to be rich. Because rich people are selfish. And then they end up like this. They're not rich towards God. And certainly that can happen. But it doesn't say that every righteous man who becomes rich has an evil thing in his bosom, and he ought to get rid of it before it destroys him. It doesn't say that. But that's the twist that's usually put on these kinds of verses. But what if he is rich towards God? Oh, different story altogether. What manner of man is he that lays up treasure for himself and is rich toward God? He's the manner of man that can have great influence and shine into the community and actually have a very, very positive effect in the culture. I don't think anyone would argue that point. Now let's look at another warning in James chapter 4. I think we were just there. Let's go back to James chapter 4. Now, we read verse 3. Let's go to James 4:13, and then we're kind of getting close to maybe wrapping this up. I have a lot of material on this, but I think it could go into a part 2. 3 maybe. James chapter 4 verse 13, planning your business in advance with God as a partner. You know, in the model prayer where he tells them when you pray like this. Part of the prayer is, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what this is really getting at here. When you take care of business, whether it's selling crafts at a craft show or being a salesman that's on the road going to sell something for your company, to represent your company, to get a new contract for your company, this applies directly to you. Go now, this is James 4:13, go now you that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year. We will buy and sell, and we will get great gain. Whereas you do not know what shall be tomorrow. Why, in other words, why are you talking like that when you don't know what's in the future? After all, your life could come to a close right now. It could come to a close when you're on the road. You could fall over when you're in the middle of a business transaction or signing a contract. But you don't know what's going to happen. What about your life? Aren't you just like a vapor? Don't you just appear for a moment, then after that you're gone? Yeah, here today, gone tomorrow. So then what should you do about it? Verse 15. Here's what you ought to say instead. If the Lord is willing, we will live and do this and do that. and we will conduct business according to his will. Well, now you've got a partner. And so you go in prayer and you inquire and you ask for direction and inspiration and guidance and all the rest. And you look for every biblical application to what you're hoping to accomplish. And then you've got a partner who owns the universe and can guide you if you're humble and willing to receive that guidance. Now that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing, whether it's a Kool-Aid stand or building a skyscraper. Another warning, and then I'm going to maybe break this off at this point. So much more material here, I just can't cover it. I'll give you an insight into the part 2. Let's see here. Acts chapter 8. You know, you don't really have to turn over there, but I'll cite it. It's Acts 8:18 through 22, where Simon Magus sees the power that Peter does by laying on of hands, that people are receiving the Holy Spirit. And he offers them money, saying, "Give me also this power. Let me buy this ability from you, Peter." Who was this man? He was a magician. He was a sorcerer. He was one who interacts with demons. And he saw, wow, if I can have what Peter has, if I can pay him enough and get this power, I will be enriched even more. Okay. Peter says your money perish with you because you have thought that the gift of God can be purchased with money. Maybe some of the churches that you have been associated with, or even in and outside of our tradition, in the Protestant and Catholic traditions as well, money has had a tremendous influence on those who have been granted positions of power and influence. So this speaks directly to that. Peter says, you do not have a part in this lot or in this matter, for your heart is not right in the sight of God. Repent, therefore, of your wickedness and pray that God will perhaps forgive you. So opportunists come out of the woodwork like cockroaches. And there's money to be had. Many a church has been run as a business because you got a lot to protect. You have to keep things running. You have to hold up the empire, so to speak. You got all these liabilities. You got salaries. You've got building maintenance. You got all these various other expenses and overhead. And so, it's a difficult thing it's a difficult position to be put in when you know that if you speak the truth, half of your people might walk out and not come back, and now who's going to pay the bills? Well, that can be a difficult thing. Okay. It is 9:58. And let's see. Okay. Yeah, we've gotten through 8 pages here of 48. So we'll have to come back to this maybe at some future date.
Are you ready for questions then, Alan?
Yeah, I think I should open up for questions, but just for your own information, some of the topics that are yet to be covered are going to be, let's see here. More warnings. One of the topics is that God does in fact give exceedingly great riches to some people. Of course, he doesn't do it without purpose. And so when we have this false concept that prosperity and riches are evil, that wealth is an evil thing, and we have to come to terms with the fact that, well, then does God give evil things to people? You know, we go into the whole idea of a land of milk and honey. Well, then that would be an evil thing, because that terminology indicates wealth and riches. We go into principles of giving later, all about being generous, how to give, and what the biblical guidelines are when it comes to giving and generosity, caring for the weak. We go into the warnings against being lazy, because there are, of course, many, many people who expect something for nothing. The Bible is filled with guidelines concerning laziness in the Old and New Testaments. We go into first fruits, priority with our first fruits. And we go into principles of living as far as what are the virtues and habits that bring about a successful lifestyle, and much, much more. There's so much more to this that it really is worth looking into. And I've never really looked at it this close before. So, I mean, I was really surprised about how much information throughout the entirety of Scripture is really referencing the idea of wealth, prosperity, poverty, and all the rest. So let's open it up for questions at this time so that we don't wear you out here.
Okay, I'm going to put the meeting into question and answer mode. You're going to hear a lady tell our phone callers about pound 6. And just ask that if you have something you want to ask, you can use the chat room, and Alan can see the chat room. In fact, there's already 2 questions in there. And you can either turn on your webcam and we know you have something to ask. Also, on the top of your screen, you will see a word that says interact. If you go on the top, you click on that, a drop-down box will appear. It says, I'm fine, raising my hand, yes, no, speed up, slow down, reset attendees. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. Or if things slow down, you can just jump in. So I'm going to put this in the question and answer mode, and we'll go and ask questions.
Okay, I see a couple questions in the text.
Hang on a second now. I got to put this in a different mode here.
Okay.
Not being nice. Boy. All right, Alan, I'm going to need your help.
Sure, go ahead.
Up on the top of the screen, it says, my screen is frozen. Up on the top of the screen, it says more. Click on the more.
Okay.
There'll be a drop-down box that says meeting options or something like that.
Share slides, play YouTube video, run an audience poll, take meeting notes, invite more people. Webinar options,
that's what you want right there, webinar options.
Okay.
And you want to click on question and answer mode.
Okay.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Okay.
Okay, we are now in interactive mode, question and answer. So you can read the questions in the chat room, and then you can raise your hand or turn on your webcam or just holler.
I see that Jim has asked a question. Alan, don't you think that the early Christian church also had influence like Joseph and Daniel. I would say with limits, because Joseph and Daniel were put at the second in command of their Jim, or Don, can you hear me?
I'm having technical difficulties. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got the
Okay, I can't
second
tell
in
if Jim can
Daniel
hear me.
and Joseph in second in command, and then you leaped out.
Okay, so those men were second in command, right? When Daniel was put in command as number 2 in Babylon, who do you think was running things when Nebuchadnezzar was an animal for 7 years? I expect the answer is Daniel was running things. So I don't think the Christians in the New Testament church had prominent positions in the same way. But I think that they were the light of the world. I mean, we saw that, right, in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, you are the light of the world. What did he mean? He meant that their lifestyles and their faith and their commitment was going to shine into the culture. And so I think, yes, to a certain degree, they were a great influence. And some were martyred, and some were just imprisoned, and some were not. Some were business people, I suppose, like Joseph of Arimathea and others. But no, I don't think they had the same position of prominence. Of course not. But they went out by the hundreds. And we know that those 3,000 souls that were added on the day of Pentecost, they went back home. And some of them went to Rome. And later on, when the apostle writes the epistle to the Romans, to a church where he had never been before. And who started that church then? My theory is it was the Roman Christian, the people who became Christians on that day of Pentecost, that went back to Rome. Because Rome is mentioned in Acts 2 as one of those places, one of the many places that people were in Jerusalem for Pentecost. So as far as the influence that the early church had, yes, they had a great influence, but not as being in command of the political party at that time, not as being directly under the dictator or king or prince. So I would say it would be a little different. After all, Daniel was untouchable as long as Nebuchadnezzar had his arm around him, right? Joseph too. I don't know if I answered your question or not. There's another question here, Mark Thornton. Did you mention Luke 12:15? Yes, I did. And that was what we talked about. A man's life does not consist of the abundance of the things which he possesses. And I did mention that having to do with, it's not the size of your bank account or how many toys you own or your prestige and the status of your company. That does not measure the value of your life. Okay. Those are the only two that we saw in the text box.
And then, hey Al, it's Paul and Lorraine.
Hi, Paul. Lorraine.
Hey, yeah, so oftentimes you get the money is the root of all evil. You know, this is the socialist perspective, you know, that we should all be poor. There's the whole concept of, and you see it on the internet, it's what's considered weaponized empathy. And so essentially, what they're doing is hijacking our own moral standards and our ability to empathize with our fellow man in order to force us to serve a specific narrative. So like, oh, you don't like homeless people and you don't donate money and, on and on and on. And it's very frustrating because it doesn't say in the Bible we're all supposed to be poor people. In fact, it says the complete opposite. I mean, in Proverbs, if I'm not mistaken, it says, that you're supposed to provide for your children's children. And I think it's somewhere in Timothy about a man that doesn't provide for his own household is, and this is a Lorraine paraphrase, so forgive me, like a sinner for all intents and purposes.
Right.
So how do you rectify those things? Because really, I mean, if God's saying you're supposed to be providing for your children's children and providing for your household, if you're being told by society through this concept of weaponized empathy that, oh no, you're supposed to be a pauper, then in essence, you're being told to do something contrary to God's wishes and hopes, I guess.
Yes, at the beginning of the study, I said I would challenge anyone to show me one verse in the Bible that says a man or a woman of God ought to be impoverished rather than prosperous. There's not one verse to support that idea. Now, we can twist certain verses, and I tried to show that a little bit. With, I think, Luke 12, or maybe someplace else. But those are twists. So if it's better for us to be impoverished, we would never have been brought into a land of milk and honey. Land, and if you go look at the full description of that land, it's got all kinds of metal to be mined out of the hills. It's got houses you didn't build, trees and orchards you didn't plant, wells you did not dig, and all these things that were to come into their possession. These terms are representations of wealth. So you're right, Lorraine. Challenge that person who calls you into question and say, if you're a Christian and you're coming at me with this concept, show me one place that says I'm supposed to be in poverty. And that's more righteous. If it's not a Christian,
there's the whole, well, you're supposed to give to the poor. I'm like, yeah, but you're not supposed to give to the point where you're poor too.
And you're not supposed to be an enabler.
I agree. And then there's also those who, wear their charity like a badge of honor, but at the same time, are so far in debt that it's like, well, what's the whole point? You're doing all this giving and yet you're not providing for your own household. I'm having a hard time with that. It's no different than, and I'm sorry to bring the whole government into this conversation, but it's giving away money that isn't even yours or that you don't even have in order to make yourself feel better about the crappy person that you are. I don't know, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Yeah, which is also a violation of the principles of Christian living. You are not supposed to give what you don't have. And that's actually spoken in those words. You're supposed to give out of what you have, not what you don't have, right?
This is Don.
Yes,
Just a comment. I think it's a couple places that says that Abraham was a man of great possessions. I mean, and you look at what was sent. I'm forgetting the brothers, and one brother sent. They had the animals and this and all the gifts, trying to appease his brothers so he wouldn't, my mind is going blank. But you look at what
Jacob to Esau.
Yeah, Jacob to Esau. Jacob was sending all these very great valuable things that would probably be worth like an incredible amount of money in today's standards. What he was sending as a gift, he had these things to send, and you look at these people in the Old Testament, what they had. They were not poor by any standard. Just looking at that, you could see that these great people that God upheld and said are righteous or are seeking me were not poor.
Right. That's right. And I have a whole section on this study that goes through the various ones who had means. There's, quite a few in number of those that were exceedingly wealthy and remained faithful. So the example is already there for us. We know, for example, that Joseph of Arimathea was a man of means, right? And he went and took the body and laid it in the tomb, his own tomb, I think it says, and many other examples. One of the ones I was surprised with was the one where Ruth goes and sleeps by Mordecai? Is it Mordecai? Yeah. Oh, Boaz, right? Ruth and Boaz, and when she was associating with Boaz, he was a man of great riches, and of course it was his fields that she was gleaning in. But it turns out that this woman of faith, Ruth, was a very wealthy woman when she was married to Boaz. And I forgot to look at that one, but there's so many other places, Don, that the examples are there for us to observe.
But this one gets thrown in the face. Oh, look at Job. He had all that money and all the things he went through because he had that money. I'm like, hello, he was tested for a specific reason, not because he had money. I mean, come on, people. Really?
No, he wasn't tested because he had money. He was the most righteous man at that time. I mean, it says there was none more righteous on the earth than my servant Job. So, no, he wasn't self-sufficient. He was praying for his children before the disaster came because he feared that they had gone over to the other side. He feared that they were lacking in righteousness and that they were not living that lifestyle that really exalted and honored God. And if he was a self-sufficient man, would he be doing that? Would he even be doing that? No, he was the most righteous man on the earth at that time. The whole ordeal had to do with other issues, many other issues. And afterwards, he was given twice as much as he had before. And it enumerates the amount of whatever it was, sheep and asses and all the rest at the end of the book. Now, if it was wrong to be extremely wealthy, why would he be given twice as much?
All right. I mean, here's a dude that was totally covering all his bases. And, some people point, well, he was so righteous, but he was punished because he had all this stuff. And I'm just like, come on, really? And
no.
I deal with some pretty crazy people on Facebook, and yes, my husband tells me I shouldn't even engage. But sometimes it's hard because you want to defend. She loves a challenge. No, you want to defend the Lord, and you want to defend His word. Because I just some crazy stuff, and this whole concept of weaponized empathy or whatever you want to call it, basically trying to hit people over the heads with their twisted sense of what morality or what Christianity is, and trying to set the record straight it's a battle. And money's a big deal because, everyone's like, oh, we should help the refugees, or, oh, we should pay for this, or we should pay for that. And,
you know what, Lorene, one of the biggest problems that you can raise to those who want to help the refugees is the problem of discrimination. If I help the Mexican refugees and I help the Syrian refugees, then why don't I help the Sudanese and the Zimbabwe and the Malaysian and the ones in Bangladesh and the ones in, and on it goes. So you're going to help that refugee, but not that refugee. Look, we are not able to bring the whole world into our nation, and we're not able to bankroll the entire world. So to put a guilt trip on me that we're supposed to help refugees, I would say back to you then, if you believe in helping refugees, why are you discriminating against all the other refugees?
Why are you discriminating against our domestic refugees, our homeless, our veterans?
There you go. So the argument really falls at that point. The person who wants to guilt trip you is going to have to answer to why they don't help the ones in Sudan and the ones in Zimbabwe, and only the ones in Syria and Mexico. But I don't know how you're going to answer that question.
Well, it's been an interesting dialogue because children of brothers and sisters in the church have kind of gone on this socialistic bent, and they try to throw the whole, well, being a good Samaritan and all this other stuff. And when you combat them and explain, well, we're not discriminating against the foreigner, because just like Ruth, she adopted the customs, the God, the laws, everything of the people. And then they say, well, you can't bring religion into this. I'm like, well, you just did, but okay. And then you throw in the UN resolutions and the safe zones that are being created in all these other Middle Eastern countries for these refugees. And then they go back to but we should help everyone. And because the Bible says so. I'm like, you know what? You keep moving the goalposts, all right?
Well, as far as the young people being drinking the Kool-Aid kind of thing, the Bible is clear. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. And if they have not been raised as teenagers to be responsible, hardworking teenagers, they're certainly not going to come into young adulthood understanding the difficulty of carrying your own weight. And I mean, if you're just a student and you don't really know what it's like to put your time in to earn $1, and you don't really know what it's like, how hard it is to pay your bills, to keep things going, well, you're full of foolishness. You have no experience. So why would we pay attention to the person who has little or no experience at all? Why is there any credibility in their opinion? Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child.
Well, Eliyahu had some good points with Job, so he scores some points there because he was the young guy out of the group of friends.
Yeah.
Because there is some wisdom in quite a few of our young. It's just,
but he was not. But you got to remember too, he was not what we're describing in the Wall Street sit-in people or in the other demonstration people. This Elihu was a very special individual. He wasn't just any run-of-the-mill young man either.
No, I agree, and it's encouraging to see. Facebook has its pluses and minuses. I mean, the pluses are seeing the young folk actually understanding the concept of a work ethic, that concept of, paying your dues, so to speak, and then maybe even going out on your own and being an entrepreneur. Like I've been following your daughter and son-in-law, and it's great what they're doing, because it's another concept of self-sufficiency in a way, being an entrepreneur, and maybe this is something we need to convey to our young. Being an entrepreneur is basically stepping out on faith that instead of looking to, and please forgive me for using this term, but instead of having a pharaoh or an employer provide for you, because you're providing your labor to that person, you are now taking a step on faith that God is going to provide for you now, that you're going to take the blessings that he gives you, and you're going to produce, 5, double, or, 10, or whatever it might be. And I can tell you from experience that it was literally just about 10 years ago, I stepped out on my own, and it was one of those, I was putting my toe in the water and taking it out and putting the toe in the water, taking little side jobs. And next thing you know, it was kind of like, nope, Lorraine, I want you to just be out there and trust me. And this is by no means bragging, but it's very rare that we do any marketing because emails come in or calls. I mean, there'll be times where I'm looking going, Lord, I don't know. I don't see any work coming in. I'm a little worried, cash flow. And not within 5-10 minutes, I get an email or a phone call saying, hey, can you send us a proposal? And it's finally gotten me to the point where, just shut up, trust God. He's gonna, he's, he sees how much you can handle, and he knows when you need work.
Right.
And the other thing too that I've had to learn is to not be envious of my competition, because God has blessed me a certain way, and to do things a certain way. And our company, because Paul now, he works with me too when he's not working with his company, our reputation precedes us. And that's not us. That's the Spirit of God working through us. And, there are just some days where I'm like, I am just amazed. I can't even explain. It's almost supernatural. It is supernatural. All the blessings and all the work that comes our way. But I can also tell you this for a fact: if there wasn't a Sabbath, I'd probably be dead by now with how much we work. I mean, but
that's what self-employment is like, though. You're going to work a lot harder than you ever have before, and people think that, oh, you're your own boss. You can take it easy. You can just do what you want to do. Oh no!
Oh
you
no!
know what? Every one of my customers is my boss, and they all want to tell me what to do. And they're paying me, so they get the rights to tell me what to do and when to do it. So I got like 100 bosses now.
That's true. But the beautiful thing is being able to tell somebody no. And there's been at least 2 or 3 clients that I've actually fired in the almost 10 years that we've been in business, just because either A, I didn't get a good feeling with working with that person, or didn't really care for the way that they either treated me or my folks that work with me. So, yeah, I don't even know how to convey that to young folks, because they're just so conditioned now to work for people. I'm not saying working for people is bad. I think you should do that. In fact, there's an elderly gentleman that my husband and I, Paul, and I take out to lunch every week. And I think he's like 92, 93. But he's the guy that I started working for back in 96, almost 21 years ago. And he started out on his, so he's kind of like a mentor to me. And since he's been retired, it's kind of like payback. I throw him a little work to keep him busy. And I know we're recording this, and I hope it never gets back to him, but I'm not just giving him work just to give him work. It's just, it gives him pleasure to do that sort of stuff. And
so you give him the stuff that you really don't want to do. Is that it?
No, I don't mind doing it. It's just, he likes doing it more than I do. How's that sound?
I'm just messing with you.
I know, but I'm sorry to hog the conversation. Anyway, carry on. I'll just mute. Excuse me.
All right. Anybody else have a comment or a question? I can't believe with a topic like money that people would not have questions or comments.
Well, while others are formulating deep in thought and meditation on the question to ask you, here's something to consider. The virtuous woman. She sees a field, ponders a field, and then buys it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not someone who's poor.
But didn't she
No.
ask permission first from her husband? No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
No, that's right. The husband had enough trust in her intelligence to, oh yeah, you see it, go for it. But she wasn't poor. She can go and buy a
No.
field.
No, and an impoverished man never hired anybody. It's very difficult to help other people if you yourself are impoverished. So when this Proverbs 31 woman was able to buy a field and to do many other things that are mentioned there, you're right, Don. She wasn't poor, and she was able to help a lot of other people in the process of doing business. It's part of keeping the commerce flowing in the community, and it's a great benefit to everybody who's part of that sequence or chain of the flow of goods and services. But the person who is not involved, who does not participate in that, they are not helping really anybody in the way of being a light in the community. That woman, people knew that this woman means what she says. This woman can be trusted when you buy something from her. This woman is not someone I have to be concerned about checking up to see whether she really did what she said. But you're right. And for us to be a light in a dark place, if our young people could somehow be encouraged and strengthened and supported to be Christian entrepreneurs, there could be a new era of influence in the future of the Babylon that we live in. There's so much more to be said about that. That's why this book here that I'm reading is such an important book. It's a book written by a Christian who believes it's super important for young people to get involved in every aspect of our culture's proceedings, from entertainment and banking and industry and commerce and medical and every area of professional work, so that their light will be present in those places. Many Christians have done that and are doing that already. But I personally feel like we haven't done a very good job at seeing that as part of our mission.
What was the first question that you asked there, Alan, about what does the Bible say about the poor? Or about being okay to be poor or something like that?
I asked the question, can you find one place in the entirety of the Bible that says it's better for the man or a woman of faith to be impoverished than to be prosperous? Is there any place in the Bible that says that? Even one place that kind of like indicates it's better for you to be in poverty than to be wealthy? And I say the answer is no. Go ahead.
I like, what you brought up in Proverbs 30 there. That's, there's that happy medium. And one thing I noticed there too, where it says food convenient for me, in the center column it says, it's talking about food that God prescribes for us. So, you could get into the like the clean and unclean. But I mean, I like where it says here, in Deuteronomy 15:11, and then Matthew 26:11, Christ said the same thing about the poor will always be with you. And it's to see how the people who have the wealth will help the poor. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. But then Proverbs 28:6 says, better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse in his ways, though he be rich. And then I also like Proverbs 13:7, which says, there is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches. So yeah, it's this, how content you are. Because you can be poor and be happy and be, in your mind, you're wealthy.
Yes, you can to a certain extent, but you have a lot more worries and concerns that if the car breaks down, I can't get to work. If you are unable to make at least your basic needs met, then it adds a lot of stress and discontentment to your life. I'm just saying it's not a good thing to be impoverished.
Right.
It's never good. Now, all those verses in Proverbs that you mentioned, those are all, of course, very true. But when it says it's better to be poor and righteous than to be rich and unrighteous, I mean, wouldn't it be better to be rich and righteous? Yes, because then you are righteous and you have the capacity to do for others because your perspective is such. It all belongs to God anyway, to begin with. And he's going to hold me responsible for how I use it. And I'm not going to just throw it away and give it away foolishly, but I am going to help people by providing jobs for people. And if there's enough philanthropy, and if there's a way to help your neighbor because he's impoverished and very needy, you're able to show charity to him. So it's better, let me just say it this way, it's better to be righteous and wealthy than to be righteous and poor. Because you can reach out to many more people and have more influence.
But you also look at the woman who put in the 2 mites. Her offering was greater than anybody else's because they gave of their abundance and she gave all that she had. I mean, so to give to somebody necessarily doesn't have to mean it's monetary. It can be time, helping them do something, or words of encouragement.
Oh, yeah. But it doesn't say, hey, this woman who gave all that she had, it's a good thing that she was impoverished.
No.
It doesn't say that.
And then,
Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, when you brought up about the parable about the guy, building his barn because he had accumulated so much. And I always go back to Deuteronomy 8 and 17 and 18, and thou sayest in thine heart, my power and the might of my hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth. So we always have to remember to give credit where credit is due.
Yes, and that's the most important aspect to having that kind of prosperity. And that verse and many others are included later on in this study, that he has given you the power to get wealth. Well, there's something being said there. And you'd have a pretty hard time saying, well, that's he's giving you the power to have something evil. It's not what he's doing there.
And he's also giving you directives on what to do with it. Provide for your children's children,
Right.
And to provide for your household. There's it even, and I paraphrase that Timothy verse terribly, but basically, if you're not providing for your household, you're worse than an unbeliever. You're one that has no faith, basically, is what it says. And to your point, Al, being able to, and I see it in our own work, that being able to hire other folks and give them an opportunity to also work, because we have a network of consultants now that help us out with our work. I mean, that's the trickle down economics that we're all talking about, because it's just like, I'm personally, God isn't blessing us to just provide for mine and Paul's household. He's giving us these opportunities to provide for the household of, my consultant Jim and my consultant Graham, and anyone else that we end up hiring to help us work.
And in doing so, they are exposed to Christian leaders. If you have clients or employees, they're all being exposed to that light that shines. And so how much more important is that than a person who sits and it lives in fear, and they never really have that influence. They never take that talent and make it grow.
Right. Why bury the talent, because the master's going to come and require it of you when he comes back. Why not double it? Why not, quintuple it?
Yeah, and we go into that later on in the study, that section of verse there that talks about that whole situation. It's very, very interesting because of the variety of ways that can apply. But again, that's something that is later on, and this could probably go on. We did 8 pages, and I got 48. So there's much more that can be discussed on that. And it's very worthwhile going through.
Part of that with the inheritance, the children's children, or even of the talents, can it go beyond more than just a physical versus spiritual, like to teach your children and your grandchildren the ways of God and to walk in his ways and to do his will?
Yes, most certainly so.
Which would be a more important inheritance than anything physical.
Yes, but the act of generosity, the act of giving, is a spiritual act when it's done with the right attitude, isn't it? So they're both very important. I think what you're talking about may be more along the lines of Matthew 25, where it says, I was naked and you clothed me. I was homeless and you let me in, and I was in prison and you visited me. Those are all part of also, I think, the talents. If you've been given a gift of encouragement, you better use it. And I think that parable of the talents includes those things. But people generally take that parable and apply it with finances. But it's pretty obvious that it applies across the board, much more than finances.
Right.
So, any other comments, ideas, or questions? Okay. So I'll leave you then with these questions. Do you individually want to be successful? And your answer is yes, you do. Why do you want to be successful? What are your motives? And if you do attain success, whether it be financial success or social success or exercising your gifts successfully, then it's all to be done to his glory. And as long as we understand from the outset that it all belongs to him anyway. If you're being entrusted to be responsible to use it properly, the gifts you've been given, whether these gifts are spiritual in nature or whether they are financial, you use those things properly. And that is to his glory and his honor. And that's a wonderful thing. Very, very wonderful thing. So if I ever get back out here again, I know there's a list of other speakers ahead of me. Next time I come around, I might do a part 2 on this and try to get through more of this material.
We can schedule part 2 on one of the off nights. We usually do part 1 on the 1st and 3rd, and then on the 2nd and 4th we do the continuation. Kind of like
Al?
what I'm doing with Sarah Roth. Oh, go ahead.
Al can have our spot next.
What?
No.
No.
Yeah.
You're already you're on the schedule.
Yeah, we'd be willing to acquiesce. I mean, you've got another 40 pages, right?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I don't want to get in the way of somebody else's opportunity here.
The voice of Don has spoken.
So
We're
I hope everyone enjoyed the first part here and give you something to think about, especially concerning our young people and the direction and the future of our church and the excitement and the hope and the vision that young people have for their future, that it be not squelched and that it be not frowned upon, be successful, and that our children understand the importance of hard work and of charity and of understanding that, we belong to God completely. And if that can happen, our children can become very, very influential in the future. I see that as such an important idea for me personally to try to promote within the body of our tradition. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks for presenting.